Samantha Harrison had been CEO for 10 years, and never once had anyone dared enter her office without an appointment, until that Monday morning, when an 8-year-old girl with blonde hair wearing an old sweater stood before her desk holding a handwritten envelope and said, "Miss Harrison, I want to apply for a job." The security system at Harrison Tech Solutions was state-of-the-art, designed to keep out corporate spies and unauthorized visitors. Yet somehow, at 7 in the morning, when Samantha arrived at her corner office on the 30th floor, she found a small figure sitting cross-legged on her leather couch, reading the quarterly financial report with the focused intensity of a seasoned analyst. The girl looked up when Samantha entered, her blue eyes bright with intelligence that seemed far too old for her face. "Good morning, Miss Harrison," the child said politely, setting down the report with careful precision. "I hope you don't mind that I started without you. Your third quarter projections show a 12% increase in smart thermostat sales, but I noticed your customer retention rate dropped by 3.7%. That's concerning for long-term growth sustainability." Samantha stood frozen in the doorway, her briefcase hanging forgotten in her hand. She had heard children speak before, of course, but never like this. Never with the casual authority of someone who genuinely understood complex business metrics. The girl's voice carried the careful pronunciation of someone who had learned big words by reading, rather than hearing them spoken. "Who are you?" Samantha managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you get in here?" The girl smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both innocent and knowing. "I'm Lily Sullivan. I studied your building's security protocols online. The maintenance access codes follow a predictable pattern based on the installation date of your system. It wasn't that difficult to figure out." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Though I should mention that your firewall has some vulnerabilities in the legacy code sections. You might want to patch those." Samantha slowly walked to her desk, never taking her eyes off the small intruder. This was impossible. 8-year-olds didn't hack security systems. They didn't read financial reports. They certainly didn't offer cybersecurity advice to Fortune 500 companies. "Lily," she said carefully, as if speaking to a wild animal that might bolt at any moment, "why are you here?" The girl reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. "I'm here to submit a job application for my father, Michael Sullivan. He's the most brilliant engineer I know, but he's currently working as an HVAC repair technician because sometimes the world doesn't see people's real value." Her voice carried a matter-of-fact sadness that made Samantha's chest tighten unexpectedly. "Your father sent you here?" Samantha asked, sinking into her chair. "Oh no," Lily said quickly. "Daddy doesn't know I'm here. He would never ask for help, even when we really need it. That's just who he is." She stood up and walked to Samantha's desk with the confident stride of someone much older. "But I've been studying your company for months. Harrison Tech Solutions specializes in smart climate control systems, and my father has ideas that could revolutionize your entire product line." Samantha accepted the envelope with trembling fingers. She had built her career on reading people, on knowing when someone was trying to manipulate or deceive her. But this child spoke with the quiet conviction of absolute truth. There was no pleading in her voice, no desperate sales pitch, just a calm presentation of facts, as if she were delivering a weather report. "How old are you really, Lily?" Samantha asked. 8 years and 4 months, Lily replied. "I know I don't sound like other kids my age. My father says I was reading before I could properly walk, and numbers have always made sense to me in a way that words do for other people. Last year, my IQ was tested at 156. But I don't think that really captures how minds work." The envelope felt heavy in Samantha's hands, weighted with more than just paper. She looked at this impossible child and felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart. "What exactly is in here, Lily?" "A comprehensive analysis of your current product weaknesses, 3 proposals for algorithmic improvements to your smart thermostat learning capabilities, and a detailed resume of my father's qualifications that most people never bother to see." Lily's voice remained steady, but Samantha caught a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I also included some of my own calculations, in case you think I'm making this up." Samantha opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers, covered in neat handwriting, detailed diagrams and mathematical equations that looked far too sophisticated for a child's homework. The first page was titled, Optimization Strategies for Predictive Climate Control Systems, and was filled with technical language that would challenge her own engineering team. "You wrote all of this?" Samantha asked, her voice barely audible. "Daddy taught me," Lily said simply. "He teaches me everything." Samantha Harrison had built her reputation on being unshakable. But as she stared at the handwritten technical proposal before her, she felt her world tilting on its axis. The document in her hands wasn't just impressive for a child's work. It was impressive, period. The mathematical models were elegant, the engineering concepts were sound, and the proposed improvements to their thermostat algorithms showed an understanding of machine learning that rivaled her own research and development team. "This section on thermal prediction modeling," Samantha said, pointing to a page covered in equations and flowcharts. "These aren't concepts they teach in elementary school." Lily perched on the edge of the chair across from Samantha's desk, her feet dangling several inches from the floor. "Daddy explains things differently than most people. He doesn't talk down to me or use simple words when complex ones are more accurate. When I was 6, I asked him why our apartment was always too hot in summer and too cold in winter, even though we had a thermostat. So he taught me about thermal dynamics, building insulation, and how traditional climate control systems are reactive instead of predictive." She pulled out a small notebook from her backpack and flipped to a page covered in her careful handwriting. "That's when we started designing a better system, together. One that would learn from user behavior patterns, weather forecasts, and building characteristics to anticipate temperature needs instead of just responding to them. Daddy did most of the advanced mathematics, but I helped with the data analysis and pattern recognition algorithms." Samantha looked up from the proposal, studying the child's face. "How long have you been working on this?" "About 18 months, Lily replied matter-of-factly. "We work on it together after dinner when Daddy gets home from his repair calls. He says learning is the most important thing we can do together, even more important than watching television or playing games." The proposal included detailed schematics that looked like they belonged in a graduate-level engineering thesis, not in the hands of an 8-year-old. But more than the technical brilliance, what struck Samantha was the obvious collaboration between father and daughter that showed through every page. She could see 2 different handwriting styles, adult corrections and childish questions scrawled in the margins, the evidence of countless hours spent together over kitchen table learning sessions. "Your father taught you calculus?" Samantha asked, pointing to a complex equation. "And differential equations and basic programming and how to read technical specifications," Lily nodded. "He says that understanding how things work is more important than memorizing what they're called. He taught me that problems are just puzzles waiting for the right solution, and that the best engineers are the ones who never stop asking questions." Samantha flipped to the next section of the proposal and found herself looking at a hand-drawn diagram of a revolutionary approach to zone-based climate control that addressed several limitations she knew plagued their current product line. The drawing was clearly done by a child, complete with colored pencils and slightly uneven lines, but the engineering concepts it illustrated were sophisticated enough to warrant serious consideration. "This zone optimization algorithm," Samantha said, tapping the page, "this could actually work. My team has been struggling with similar efficiency problems for months." Lily's face brightened with quiet pride. "Daddy figured out that most smart thermostats fail because they treat the whole house like one big room, when really, every space has different heating and cooling needs based on size, window placement, and how people use them. Our system would use multiple sensors and learning algorithms to create individualized climate zones that adapt to real usage patterns." "And you understand all of this?" Samantha asked. "I understand the theory," Lily said honestly. "Daddy handles the more complex implementation details, but I'm good at spotting patterns and asking the right questions. He says that's the most important part of engineering anyway, knowing what questions to ask." Samantha set down the proposal and really looked at the child sitting across from her. Lily wasn't trying to impress her or show off. She spoke about advanced engineering concepts with the same casual tone other children used to discuss their favorite cartoons. There was no arrogance in her manner, just the quiet confidence of someone who had been treated as an intellectual equal for her entire life. "Why did you come here yourself, Lily?" Samantha asked gently. "Why didn't your father apply directly?" For the first time since entering the office, Lily hesitated. Her confident demeanor flickered, and Samantha caught a glimpse of the vulnerable child beneath the brilliant surface. Because Daddy doesn't think anyone will take him seriously anymore. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Samantha was only beginning to understand. She looked again at the proposal, seeing it now not just as an impressive technical document, but as a child's desperate attempt to restore her father's faith in himself. "Tell me about your father, Lily," Samantha said softly. Lily's eyes grew distant, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that no 8-year-old should have to bear. "Daddy used to be a real engineer, working for big companies and designing important things. He had an office with windows and people who respected his ideas. But then Mommy got sick, and everything changed." She pulled out a small photograph from her notebook and placed it on Samantha's desk. It showed a younger man in a suit standing next to a beautiful woman, both of them smiling at the camera with the easy confidence of people who believed the world was full of possibilities. "That was before," Lily said simply. "Daddy took time off to take care of Mommy when she was in the hospital, and then after she died, he couldn't focus on work anymore. He says he made some mistakes, missed some deadlines, and his company decided he wasn't reliable anymore. Now, he fixes air conditioners for other people instead of designing new ones." Samantha studied the photograph, seeing the happiness that radiated from both faces. She could imagine how devastating it must have been for this man to lose not just his wife, but his career and his sense of purpose all at once. "But he's still brilliant," Lily continued, her voice growing stronger. "Every night after dinner, he helps me with my homework, and then we work on projects together. He built me a computer from old parts he found, and he taught me how to program it. He can look at any machine and understand exactly how it works, and he can fix things that other people throw away." She reached into her backpack again and pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a calculator and a miniature control panel. "He made this for me last month. It's a prototype smart thermostat controller that can learn from user behavior and optimize energy consumption in real time. He built it entirely from recycled components he salvaged from repair jobs, but it works better than the expensive systems his clients pay thousands of dollars for." Samantha took the device and examined it closely. Despite its cobbled-together appearance, the craftsmanship was exceptional. The circuit board was hand-soldered with precision that spoke to years of professional experience, and the interface design was intuitive and elegant. "He'll make this in your apartment?" Samantha asked. "In our kitchen," Lily nodded. "He converted one corner into a little workshop where he tinkers with broken electronics. He says that fixing things is just another form of engineering, and that understanding why something breaks teaches you how to build it better the next time. And he taught you how to help." He says I have good eyes for spotting problems, and good questions for understanding solutions. Mostly I hand him tools and ask him to explain what he's doing, but sometimes I notice things he misses because I think about problems differently than adults do. His voice carried such obvious love and admiration for her father that Samantha felt her throat tighten. This wasn't just a daughter defending her parent. This was a brilliant child who genuinely saw her father as her hero, despite what the rest of the world might think of his current circumstances. "Does your father know how much you believe in him?" Samantha asked. Lily's composure finally cracked, and tears began to well up in her eyes. "I don't think so. He tries to hide it, but I know he feels like he failed us. He apologizes for things that aren't his fault, like when we have to eat sandwiches for dinner because he didn't have enough repair calls that week, or when I wear the same coat all winter because we can't afford a new one." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to regain her composure. "But he never failed me. He's the best daddy in the world, and he's still the smartest person I know. I just want someone else to see that too." The vulnerability in Lily's voice broke something open in Samantha's chest. She had spent so many years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the messiness of human emotion, that she had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone else's happiness more than her own success. "Lily," she said gently, "why me? Why Harrison Tech Solutions? Because your company is working on the same problems that Daddy thinks about every day. And because I researched you, Miss Harrison. You started this company when you were only 26 years old, and you built it from nothing into something amazing. You understand what it's like to be underestimated, because of who you are, instead of what you can do. Lily's words hit Samantha like a physical blow. This child had seen through all her carefully constructed professional armor and identified the core truth that Samantha herself had spent years trying to forget. She had built her success on proving that she was more than the sum of other people's expectations, and somewhere along the way, she had lost the ability to extend that same grace to others. "You're right," Samantha whispered. "I do understand." As Samantha sat in her office looking at this remarkable child, memories from her own past began to surface unbidden. She remembered being 10 years old, trying to explain to her teacher why she had solved a math problem using a method they hadn't learned yet. She remembered the frustration of being told to slow down and wait for the other children when her mind raced ahead to connections and possibilities that others couldn't see. She remembered the loneliness of being different, of having thoughts and ideas that set her apart from her peers. Most of all, she remembered the adults who had looked at her with suspicion instead of wonder, who had seen her intelligence as a problem to be managed rather than a gift to be nurtured. "I was like you once," Samantha said quietly, more to herself than to Lily. "I was the kid who read technical manuals for fun and asked too many questions that made adults uncomfortable." Lily nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. "Did people tell you that you were too serious? That you should play more and think less?" "Every day," Samantha replied. "My teachers, my relatives, even my friends' parents. They all seemed to think there was something wrong with a little girl who preferred building circuits to playing with dolls." "Did it make you sad?" The simple question hit Samantha harder than any business negotiation ever had. "Yes," she admitted. "It made me very sad, and eventually it made me angry. I decided that if the world was going to judge me anyway, I might as well give them something worth judging." She looked at Lily, seeing her own younger self reflected in the child's earnest face. "Is that what you're doing now? Trying to prove that you and your father are worth more than people think?" "Maybe," Lily said softly. "I just know that Daddy deserves better than fixing other people's broken air conditioners for the rest of his life. He's capable of so much more, but I think he's forgotten that about himself." Samantha felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. When had she become so hardened that it took an 8-year-old to remind her what compassion felt like? When had she stopped seeing the person behind the resume, the story behind the statistics? "Tell me more about your father," she said. "Not his qualifications or his technical skills. Tell me about who he is." Lily's face softened. "He makes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs every Saturday morning, even when we're almost out of groceries. He reads to me every night, and he does different voices for all the characters, even the girl ones. When I have nightmares, he sits by my bed and explains how dreams work scientifically until I'm not scared anymore." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "He never talks down to me or tells me I'm too young to understand something. If I ask a question, he finds a way to explain the answer at my level, even if it takes hours. He's teaching me calculus not because he wants me to be a child prodigy, but because I asked how curves work, and he wanted to give me a complete answer." "He sounds like an extraordinary father," Samantha said. "Liz. But I think he's forgotten that being a good daddy is just as important as being a successful engineer. He judges himself by standards that don't include the most important things he does every day." Lily's words hit Samantha like a revelation. She realized that she had been making the same mistake, measuring her worth by professional achievements while ignoring the human connections that gave life meaning. She had become so focused on proving her value to the world that she had lost touch with her own humanity. "Lily," she said carefully, "what would make your father happy? Really happy?" "I think he'd be happy if someone gave him a chance to use his brain again for something that matters. Not just fixing what's broken, but creating something new. Something that could help people and make the world a little bit better." The sincerity in Lily's voice was overwhelming. This child had somehow managed to identify exactly what Samantha's company needed. Not just technical expertise, but the kind of passionate innovation that came from someone who genuinely cared about solving problems for their own sake. And what would make you happy, Lily? I'd be happy if Daddy stopped apologizing for who he is. If he remembered that being smart and kind and creative makes him special, not broken. She looked directly into Samantha's eyes. I'd be happy if someone saw him the way I see him. The two sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Samantha realized that this child had accomplished something that months of corporate headhunting and professional networking had failed to achieve. She had found exactly the kind of person Harrison Tech Solutions needed, not by looking at credentials or connections, but by recognizing talent and character where others had failed to see it. More than that, Lily had forced Samantha to confront the person she had become in her relentless pursuit of success. She had built a company that prided itself on innovation, but she had forgotten that true innovation came from people, not processes. It came from individuals who saw problems as puzzles and who cared enough to keep working until they found solutions. "Would you like to meet your father, Lily?" Samantha asked finally. "You mean you want to meet him?" Lily's eyes widened with hope and disbelief. "I mean, I want to see for myself if he's half as remarkable as his daughter thinks he is." 2 hours later, Samantha Harrison found herself standing outside a modest apartment building in a neighborhood she had never visited, holding a folder containing Lily's handwritten proposal and feeling more nervous than she had in years. This wasn't her world of boardrooms and power lunches. This was real life, with peeling paint and narrow hallways and the sound of children playing in the courtyard. Lily had called ahead, telling her father only that someone wanted to meet him about a potential job opportunity. She hadn't mentioned who that someone was or how they had connected. Michael Sullivan answered the door, wearing work clothes and an expression of cautious confusion that transformed into alarm when he saw Samantha standing next to his daughter. "Mr. Sullivan," Samantha said, extending her hand, "I'm Samantha Harrison from Harrison Tech Solutions. I believe you and I have some things to discuss." Michael looked from Samantha to Lily and back again, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been panic. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake. I didn't apply for any position at your company." "No, you didn't," Samantha agreed. "But your daughter did, on your behalf." The color drained from Michael's face. "Lily, what did you do?" "I told Miss Harrison the truth, Daddy, that you're the smartest engineer I know and that her company would be lucky to have you." Michael's apartment was small but meticulously organized, with a tiny kitchen that doubled as a workshop and a living room lined with bookshelves containing an eclectic mix of engineering textbooks, children's literature, and technical manuals. In one corner, Samantha could see the makeshift laboratory where father and daughter had spent countless hours learning and creating together. Michael painted. "Mr. Sullivan," Samantha said gently, "may I ask you about this?" She showed him the prototype thermostat controller that Lily had brought to her office. Michael took it with hands that trembled slightly, examining it as if he couldn't quite believe it existed. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Your daughter showed it to me this morning along with a very impressive technical proposal that she said you worked on together." Michael closed his eyes and Samantha could see him struggling with a complex mix of emotions. Pride in his daughter's initiative warred with embarrassment at his current circumstances, and fear that this unexpected attention might somehow backfire on both of them. "Miss Harrison," he said finally, "I appreciate whatever Lily has told you, but I think you should know that I'm not exactly an ideal candidate for a position at your company. My employment history over the past few years has been inconsistent." "Because you were caring for your wife and then grieving her loss," Samantha said matter-of-factly. "That doesn't make you unemployable, Mr. Sullivan. It makes you human." She moved closer to examine the small workshop area, noting the careful organization of tools and components, the half-finished projects that spoke to an active and creative mind, the evidence of a brilliant intellect that had found ways to stay engaged despite difficult circumstances. "This is where you and Lily work together?" she asked. "When I'm not out on repair calls." Michael nodded. "She's curious about everything, and I've always believed that children should have honest answers to their questions, even if those answers are complicated." Samantha picked up a notebook filled with technical sketches and mathematical calculations in 2 different handwriting styles. The collaboration between father and daughter was evident on every page, with childish questions leading to sophisticated solutions, and simple observations sparking complex innovations. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "I'd like to offer you a position as senior engineer on my research and development team. The starting salary would be $85,000 annually, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement based on performance." Michael stared at her in shock. "I don't understand. You don't know anything about my work history, my references, I know that you raised a daughter who thinks problems are puzzles waiting for solutions. I know that you built a functional prototype of advanced climate control technology using salvaged parts and a kitchen table. And I know that you've created innovations that my own engineering team hasn't thought of yet." She gestured to the notebook in her hands. "Most importantly, I know that you've taught your daughter that intelligence is a gift to be shared, not a weapon to be wielded. That tells me more about your character than any reference check ever could." Michael looked at Lily, who was watching the exchange with barely contained excitement. "Sweetheart, what exactly did you tell Ms. Harrison?" "I told her that you're brilliant and kind and that you deserve a chance to build new things instead of just fixing broken ones," Lily said simply. "I told her that you taught me everything I know and that anyone who could teach a kid like me must be pretty special themselves." Samantha saw tears gathering in Michael's eyes as he looked at his daughter. "You did all this for me?" "I did it for us, Daddy, because I want you to remember how amazing you are." The moment stretched between them, filled with love and understanding, and the kind of connection that reminded Samantha why human relationships mattered more than corporate success. She realized that she wasn't just offering Michael a job. She was giving herself the opportunity to remember what it felt like to make decisions based on human potential rather than spreadsheet projections. "There's one condition," Samantha said, breaking the emotional silence. "I'd like Lily to participate in our youth innovation program. We partner with local schools to provide advanced learning opportunities for students with exceptional abilities. She could spend afternoons at our facility, working with our engineering team and having access to resources that match her intellectual capability." "You want me to work there too?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with possibility. "I want you to have the chance to learn from people who understand how your mind works," Samantha replied. "And I suspect our team could learn quite a bit from you as well." Michael looked overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of his circumstances. "Ms. Harrison, I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous, but I need you to understand that I come with complications. I'm a single father, which means I have responsibilities that might affect my availability for overtime or travel." "Mr. Sullivan," Samantha said firmly, "one of the things I've learned today is that being a dedicated parent doesn't make someone less valuable as an employee. It makes them more valuable as a human being, and human beings are what drive innovation." She looked around the small apartment, seeing it now not as evidence of reduced circumstances, but as proof of resilience and creativity, and the kind of love that finds ways to flourish, even in difficult conditions. "Besides," she added with a smile, "I have a feeling that hiring you and your daughter might be one of the smartest business decisions I've ever made." 6 months later, Harrison Tech Solutions announced the launch of their revolutionary new smart climate system, featuring predictive algorithms and zone-based optimization that set new industry standards for efficiency and user satisfaction. The technical press praised the innovation as a breakthrough that would transform how people thought about home automation. What the press didn't know was that the core concepts had been developed at a kitchen table by a single father and his 8-year-old daughter, working together in the quiet hours after dinner when the rest of the world assumed nothing important was happening. Michael Sullivan had become one of Samantha's most valued team members, bringing not just technical expertise but a collaborative approach that elevated everyone around him. His patient teaching style and ability to explain complex concepts in accessible terms had transformed the company's development process, creating an environment where innovation flourished through shared understanding rather than competitive isolation. Lily had thrived in the Youth Innovation Program, working alongside graduate students and experienced engineers who quickly learned to value her unique perspective. Her ability to ask unexpected questions and spot patterns that others missed had contributed to several breakthrough moments in the development process. But perhaps the most significant change had been in Samantha herself. Working with Michael and Lily had reminded her why she had fallen in love with engineering in the first place. It wasn't about winning or proving superiority, it was about the joy of discovery and the satisfaction of solving problems that made life better for other people. She had started visiting the Sullivan apartment regularly, ostensibly to discuss work projects, but really to experience the warmth of a home where intelligence was nurtured with love rather than wielded as a weapon. She watched Michael read bedtime stories with different voices for every character, and she saw Lily explain her latest discoveries with the enthusiasm of someone who had never been told that learning should be a chore. In their company, Samantha remembered what it felt like to be curious rather than competitive, to ask questions because she genuinely wanted to understand rather than because she needed to demonstrate her knowledge. She rediscovered the person she had been before success had taught her to protect herself behind walls of professional achievement. The little girl who had walked into her office that Monday morning had given Samantha more than a brilliant engineer and an innovative product line. She had given her the chance to remember that the most important innovations happened not in laboratories or boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when people who cared about each other worked together to make something better than either could create alone. And sometimes, late in the evening when the three of them sat around Michael's kitchen table working on their latest project, Samantha would look at this impossible family she had somehow become part of and understand that Lily's greatest gift hadn't been her technical proposal or her father's engineering expertise. It had been her reminder that brilliance meant nothing without kindness, that success was hollow without connection, and that the most valuable things in life couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or professional accolades. They could only be measured in the love that passed between people who saw each other's true worth and chose to nurture it, one small act of faith at a time. The knock on the cabin door echoed through the Montana night, rain pounding mercilessly on the wooden roof. James Reynolds frowned, setting down his medical journal. No one ventured this far into the mountains after dark. Opening the door, he froze at the sight of William Wilson, the pharmaceutical tycoon whose offers he'd twice refused. But it wasn't the powerful CEO who held his attention, it was the young woman in the wheelchair, rain streaming down her expressionless face. Catherine Wilson, once a celebrated ballet dancer, now motionless from the waist down. Without hesitation, James knelt to her level, his voice soft but certain. "Let me help her." James Reynolds hadn't always been a recluse. 3 years ago, he'd been at the pinnacle of neurology, pioneering revolutionary treatments for spinal cord injuries at Boston Medical Center. His methods combined cutting-edge technology with alternative therapies other neurologists dismissed, but his results spoke for themselves. Patients deemed permanently paralyzed had regained sensation, movement, even independence. The medical community had hailed him as brilliant, unorthodox, and tireless. They weren't wrong, but they'd missed what truly drove him. Not ambition or recognition, but a profound belief in human resilience. Then came the accident that claimed his wife, Sarah. The same hands that had helped countless patients couldn't save the woman he loved. The irony wasn't lost on him, the healer who couldn't heal his own. The media called it a tragedy when he walked away from his career at 39, retreating to the Montana wilderness with his 7-year-old daughter, Mia. The medical community called it a waste. James called it survival. The cabin, built with his own hands over the past 3 years, wasn't large but offered everything they needed. A spacious living area with a stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms, a simple kitchen, and most importantly, a converted barn that served as both his clinic and research laboratory. It was here he continued his work privately, treating the occasional local patient and pursuing his research without institutional constraints or corporate pressure. Mia had adapted to their isolated life with remarkable resilience, finding friends in books, animals, and the wilderness itself. Homeschooled by James, she possessed wisdom beyond her years, though her social interactions were limited to monthly trips into town and the rare patient who found their way to their doorstep. William Wilson, at 60, commanded respect in every room he entered. His silver hair, immaculately tailored suits, and piercing blue eyes projected authority and success, the embodiment of American capitalism. Widowed when Catherine was 8, He'd channeled his grief into building Wilson Pharmaceuticals into a global empire, amassing wealth beyond measure, but sacrificing precious time with his daughter in the process. Though he provided Catherine with every advantage, private education, ballet training with world-class instructors, a Manhattan penthouse, he'd never truly known her. His relationship with his daughter had become a series of achievements to fund and celebrate from a distance. Until 10 months ago, when the car accident shattered not only Catherine's spine, but also the comfortable distance between them. For the first time, William couldn't solve a problem with money or influence. 8 specialists, 4 rehabilitation centers, and millions of dollars later, Catherine remained paralyzed not just physically, but spiritually. Catherine Wilson had once lived for the stage. At 26, she'd been the youngest principal dancer at the New York City Ballet, known for her flawless technique and emotional expressiveness. Dance wasn't merely her career, it was her identity, her language, her freedom. The accident had taken more than her mobility. It had stolen her purpose. The vibrant, passionate artist had become a hollow shell, going through the motions of physical therapy without hope or investment. Her father's determination only deepened her despair. Each new specialist, each experimental treatment became another opportunity for disappointment. She'd stopped believing in miracles the day her neurologist had used the word permanent. What William saw as perseverance, Catherine experienced as denial. She was tired of being her father's project, tired of false hope, tired of living in the shadow of who she used to be. James ushered them into the cabin's warmth, conscious of Catherine's soaked clothing and distant expression. Mia appeared in the hallway, brown curls wound around her face, clutching her beloved teddy bear. Her curious eyes took in the strangers, the imposing older man with worry etched into his face, and the young woman whose emptiness seemed to fill the room. "Mia, these are Mr. Wilson and Miss Catherine," James explained gently. "They've come a long way to see us." William stepped forward, extending his hand to James while his eyes scanned the modest surroundings. "Dr. Reynolds, I appreciate you seeing us without notice. I've followed your work for years. Your research on neuroplasticity and spinal cord injuries was groundbreaking." James accepted the handshake, his expression unreadable. "That was another lifetime. Please sit down. You're both soaked through." As James helped Catherine position her wheelchair near the fire, William produced a thick medical file. Every test, every treatment, every consultation is documented here. The best specialists in the country have seen her, but, his voice faltered. They've all reached the same conclusion. Catherine's bitter laugh cut through the room. "The conclusion is, I'll never walk again. Spare us the theatrics, Dad." Her eyes, once alive with artistic expression, now held only resignation. "I don't need your pity, Dr. Reynolds. I'm sure you have better things to do than review another hopeless case." Mia stepped forward, seemingly unaffected by Catherine's harshness. She approached the wheelchair and placed her teddy bear on Catherine's lap. "When I'm sad, Teddy helps me feel better. You can hold him too." "The old gentleman looks very sad as well." Catherine's expression softened momentarily, her fingers automatically moving to touch the well-worn fur. William watched the interaction with surprise. It was the first time in months he'd seen his daughter respond to anything with something other than indifference or hostility. James reviewed the medical file quietly, his trained eyes identifying patterns the other specialists had missed. Catherine's injury was severe but similar to cases he'd researched before his departure from medicine. The experimental treatment he'd been developing might help, though he'd never completed the clinical trials. The ethical implications were complex, the risks significant. Yet as he observed Catherine's desolation and William's desperate hope, something shifted within him. Perhaps this was why the universe had brought them to his door on this stormy night. "I can't promise anything," he finally said, closing the file, "but I believe there might be potential for improvement with a different approach." William leaned forward eagerly. "We'll try anything. Money is no object." James shook his head. "This isn't about money, Mr. Wilson. It's about commitment. The treatment I'm considering is intensive, experimental, and requires complete dedication from Catherine. If she's not fully invested, it won't work." He turned to Catherine. "This has to be your choice, not your father's." Catherine studied him with newfound interest. "You're the first doctor who's asked what I want, instead of telling me what I need." "Because healing begins with agency," James replied simply. "You've lost control over your body. I won't take your choices from you too." The silence that followed was broken by Mia's innocent question, "Will the lady dance again?" All eyes turned to the child, her question hanging in the air like a fragile hope. James put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "We don't know, sweetheart, but we can try to help her find her way back to herself, whether she dances again or not." For the first time in months, Catherine felt something other than despair. Not quite hope, but the faintest flicker of curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. William rented a small cabin half a mile from James's property, insisting on staying nearby throughout Catherine's treatment. Though the luxury accommodations in town would have been more comfortable, he recognized the symbolic importance of adapting to this simpler environment. Each morning, he drove Catherine to James's clinic, waiting patiently during the sessions before returning her to their temporary home. The CEO, who once demanded instant results, was learning the virtue of patience, watching his daughter engage with therapy in ways she hadn't for months. James's approach differed radically from conventional rehabilitation. He combined physical manipulation with sensory integration, neuroplasticity exercises, and elements of Eastern medicine. Each session began with meditation to calm Catherine's nervous system, followed by targeted physical work that focused not on forcing movement, but on re-establishing neural pathways. Most importantly, he treated Catherine as a collaborator rather than a patient, explaining each technique and the science behind it, respecting her intelligence, and involving her in the decision-making process. Mia became an unexpected part of Catherine's recovery. The little girl would sit nearby during therapy sessions, drawing pictures or reading aloud from her favorite books. Her presence transformed the clinical atmosphere, bringing warmth and levity to what could otherwise have been grueling work. Catherine found herself looking forward to Mia's stories and innocent observations. The child viewed Catherine's condition without pity or expectation. To Mia, the wheelchair was simply part of who Catherine was, not a tragedy or problem to solve. "Can you teach me ballet?" Mia asked one afternoon, twirling awkwardly in a makeshift tutu fashioned from one of James's old shirts. Catherine hesitated, pain flashing across her face. "I don't dance anymore, Mia." "But your hands still dance," Mia replied, pointing to Catherine's elegant fingers that constantly moved in unconscious patterns. "You could teach me hand dancing." From that day forward, Catherine began instructing Mia in the arm positions and hand movements of classical ballet, demonstrating the port de bras while seated in her wheelchair. These impromptu lessons became a highlight for both of them, giving Catherine a way to reconnect with her art and Mia a special bond with her new friend. James often found them this way when he returned from preparing the next phase of treatment, his daughter attempting an arabesque while Catherine gently corrected her arm placement, both of them laughing. William observed these interactions with complex emotions. Initially uncomfortable with the unstructured nature of James's methods, he gradually recognized their value as Catherine became more engaged and present. The businessman who scheduled his life in 15-minute increments learned to appreciate the unhurried rhythm of mountain life. He took long walks through the forest, thinking about the years he'd lost focusing on empire building while his daughter grew up without him. In the evenings, he began joining James on the porch after Catherine was asleep, the two men sharing whiskey in companionable silence as they watched the stars emerge over the mountains. "You had everything," William remarked one night. "Prestigious career, groundbreaking research, international recognition. Why walk away from it all?" James considered the question, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "When Sarah died, I realized I'd been living according to everyone else's definition of success. 60-hour work weeks, speaking engagements, publications, all while my wife and daughter ate dinner without me most nights." He looked toward the window where Mia slept peacefully. The day after the funeral, Mia asked if I was going to disappear too. That's when I knew something had to change. William nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Catherine used to call my secretary to schedule time with me. The admission carried the weight of years of neglect. I thought providing for her future was more important than being present for her childhood." "It's not too late," James said quietly. She's still here. You're still here. For the first time in decades, William Wilson felt the unfamiliar sting of tears. Not for lost opportunities or the daughter who could no longer dance, but for the relationship that had never been given the chance to bloom. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into the treatment. Catherine was performing the neural pathway exercises James had designed when she felt it, a faint tingling in her left big toe. The sensation was so unexpected that she gasped, interrupting James's instructions. "What is it?" he asked, immediately alert. "I felt something," Catherine whispered, afraid to hope. "My toe. I felt it." James knelt beside the treatment table, watching intently as he ran a sensory tool across the bottom of her foot. "Tell me when you feel anything, even the slightest sensation." "Dear," Catherine's voice trembled, "I felt that." William, who had been reading in the corner, rushed to his daughter's side. "What's happening?" James continued his examination, his expression carefully neutral despite the excitement building within him. The response was minimal, but undeniable. Catherine's nerves were beginning to reawaken. It was the first positive sign since the accident, validating his unconventional approach. "This is very promising," he said cautiously, "but we need to be realistic about what it means. Sensation returning doesn't guarantee mobility will follow. We're still at the beginning of a very long road." But Catherine wasn't listening to his cautions. For the first time in nearly a year, she allowed herself to feel hope, not just for walking again, but for a future that held meaning. "I want to continue," she said firmly, "whatever it takes." Later that evening, as James updated his research notes, Mia wandered into his study with her usual directness. "Is Catherine going to walk like in her pictures?" "I don't know, sweetheart," James answered honestly. "Her injury is very serious." Mia climbed onto his lap, examining the medical illustrations on his desk. "You look worried, Daddy. Is it because of what happened to the other person?" James froze. "What other person?" "Mia. The one before. The one who made you sad." Mia traced the diagram of a spinal cord with her small finger. "You told me once that you tried to help someone like Wilson wanted you to help Catherine, but it didn't work right." James felt a chill. He'd never discussed his past cases with Mia, certainly not the controversial trial that had preceded his departure from medicine. The patient who had shown initial improvement using his experimental method, only to suffer severe complications later. The malpractice suit that was settled quietly, the whispers of ethical violations that had followed him until Sarah's death, overshadowed everything else. "That was different, Mia," he said carefully. "I've learned a lot since then." Unbeknownst to them, Catherine had wheeled herself into the hallway, intending to thank James for the breakthrough. She stopped outside the study door, her celebration forgotten as she overheard their conversation. The revelation that James's treatment had potentially harmed someone before sent ice through her veins. Was she just another experiment? Another chance for a disgraced doctor to vindicate himself? Her suspicions deepened the following morning when she discovered a research proposal in her father's briefcase, a comprehensive plan to acquire James's treatment protocol and research data for commercial development through Wilson Pharmaceuticals. The document detailed the projected market value of a breakthrough paralysis treatment, the patent applications already being prepared, and the public relations strategy for announcing the innovation. There was no mention of clinical trials, patient safety, or the risks James had alluded to in his conversation with Mia. Catherine felt sick. Her improvement wasn't a miracle. It was a business opportunity. Her father hadn't brought her here out of love or concern, but as an investment in intellectual property. And James, was he complicit in this plan? Had her treatment been accelerated to prove concept for her father's next acquisition? When James arrived for their session, Catherine confronted him with the document. "Is this why you agreed to treat me? To sell your method to my father?" James paled as he scanned the proposal. "I've never seen this before. This isn't what we discussed." "So you haven't been meeting with him every night? Planning your triumphant return to medicine with Wilson Pharmaceuticals backing you?" Her voice shook with betrayal. "I trusted you. I thought you were different." Before James could respond, William entered the clinic, stopping short at the tension in the room. Catherine held up the proposal. Were you going to tell me I'm just a proof of concept for your next business venture, Dad? Or was I supposed to be grateful when you announced to the world how you'd saved me? William's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. This is a preliminary exploration, Catherine. Yes, I've been discussing potential applications with my team, but that doesn't change the fact that you're getting better. Your team? James interjected, anger rising. You've been sharing details of Catherine's treatment with your corporate team without her consent or my knowledge? I'm trying to help people, William insisted. Your method could help thousands, not just Catherine. Why keep it hidden away in this mountain cabin when it could be changing lives? Because it's not ready, James shouted, his calm facade cracking. We don't know the long-term effects. We don't understand the failure mechanisms. The last time I rushed this treatment, a man nearly died. Is that what you want for your daughter? To be a corporate guinea pig? Catherine watched the two men argue, the familiar feeling of invisibility washing over her. Once again, she was being discussed rather than included, her body a battleground for male egos and ambitions. Stop it, she finally screamed. Both of you, just stop. The room fell silent as Catherine wheeled herself between them. I'm not your miracle, Dad. I'm not your redemption, James. I'm a person who's tired of being used as a means to someone else's end. Her voice broke. I want both of you to leave me alone. William reached for her wheelchair. Catherine, please. No, she pulled away from his touch. Take me back to the cabin. I'm done with this experiment. James watched helplessly as William escorted Catherine out to the car. The familiar weight of failure settled on his shoulders. Another patient failed, another relationship destroyed. Mia appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with confusion. Where are Ong, Wilson, and Catherine going? Did I do something wrong by talking about the other patient? James gathered his daughter into his arms, guilt compounding his distress. No, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Grown-ups just make things complicated sometimes. That night, as rain once again pounded the cabin roof, James paced his laboratory. The treatment protocols spread before him represented years of work, countless hours away from his family, and the hope of helping people like Catherine. But at what cost? He'd left Boston to protect his integrity and his relationship with Mia. Had he compromised both by agreeing to treat Catherine, by allowing William Wilson into their lives? At the rented cabin, Catherine sat by the window, watching lightning split the sky. The tingling in her toe had returned, stronger now, accompanied by a sensation in her calf she couldn't quite identify. Physical progress continued, even as emotional devastation threatened to consume her. She couldn't deny James's treatment was working, but the revelation of her father's plans had reopened wounds that had never properly healed. Catherine, William said softly from the doorway, we need to talk. About what, Dad? Your stock options? The IPO potential of my damaged spine? Her bitterness was palpable. William entered the room slowly, looking older than his 60 years. For once, the powerful CEO appeared uncertain, vulnerable. He sat across from her, hands clasped tightly in his lap. I've spent my entire life believing I could control outcomes, he began. When your mother left, I doubled down on that belief. Convinced myself that if I just accumulated enough power and resources, I could protect you from ever being hurt again. He exhaled shakily. Then the accident happened, and I couldn't fix it. Do you know how terrifying that was? To finally confront my own powerlessness? Catherine looked at her father, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the authoritative exterior, she saw a frightened man, clinging to the only tools he understood: money, influence, acquisition. So you decided to buy a solution? She said, softer now. Yes, he admitted. Because that's all I know how to do. But it was never about the business opportunity, Catherine. The proposal you found, that was my team getting ahead of themselves. I just wanted to help you walk again. I wanted to undo the damage. You can't undo damage, Dad. You can only learn to live with it differently. Catherine's gaze returned to the storm outside. That's what James has been teaching me, even if he doesn't realize it. How to live with what can't be changed while fighting for what can. At the same moment, in his cabin, James sat with Mia at Sarah's old piano. Though neither played anymore, sometimes they would press the keys gently, feeling connected to her memory through the music she had loved. Tonight, James found himself telling Mia about his greatest professional failure, the patient whose complications had led to his crisis of confidence. "I was so sure I could help him," James explained. "The initial results were promising, just like with Catherine. But I moved too quickly, trying to prove my theories to colleagues who doubted me. When things went wrong, I blamed external factors, the patient's medical history, anything but my own hubris." "Did he die?" Mia asked, with a child's directness. "No, but he suffered seizures that could have been prevented if I'd proceeded more cautiously." James stroked his daughter's hair. "That's when I realized that being right wasn't as important as being responsible." "Is that why you're scared to help Catherine now?" James smiled sadly at his daughter's perception. "Part of me is terrified of making the same mistake. But another part knows I've learned from that experience. The treatment I'm using with Catherine is more refined, more cautious." "Then you should tell her that," Mia said simply. "She looked sad when she left, like she thought you didn't want to help her anymore." James realized with sudden clarity that he'd spent so much time protecting himself from failure that he might have failed Catherine in a different way, by not fighting for her trust when she needed it most. The following morning dawned clear after the storm, the mountains sharply defined against a brilliant blue sky. James was preparing breakfast when an unexpected knock came at the door. Opening it, he found Catherine in her wheelchair, her determined expression at odds with the pallor of exhaustion on her face. "You shouldn't be out alone," he said automatically. "The ground is muddy from the rain. You could have gotten stuck." "I wasn't alone," Catherine replied, gesturing behind her where a local teenager from town waited beside an ATV modified to transport her wheelchair. "I hired Dylan to bring me. Turns out, money is occasionally useful for something other than buying people." James recognized the olive branch beneath her sarcasm. "Would you like to come in? Mia will be thrilled to see you." "Actually, I'd like to see your lab first," Catherine said. "The real one, not the clinic where you've been treating me. I want to understand exactly what you're doing to my body and why." James hesitated only briefly before nodding. "You have that right." He thanked Dylan and promised to drive Catherine home later, then led her around to the converted barn behind the cabin. The laboratory was nothing like the high-tech facilities Catherine had imagined. Instead, it was a thoughtful blend of traditional medical equipment and handcrafted elements. Treatment tables James had built himself, shelving units filled with both pharmaceutical compounds and natural remedies, and walls covered with anatomical drawings, interspersed with patient progress notes. At the center stood a workbench where James clearly spent most of his time, surrounded by journals, research papers, and handwritten observations. "This is where you developed the treatment?" Catherine asked, taking it all in. "Yes, after I left Boston, I stripped everything back to first principles." James moved beside her, pointing to a timeline on one wall. "This tracks the development process, including the failure that made me leave conventional medicine." Catherine studied the chart, seeing for the first time the meticulous way James had analyzed what went wrong, how he'd identified the error in his approach, and the painstaking process of rebuilding his method with additional safeguards. "You've been more cautious with me," she observed. "I had to be," James admitted. "Not just because of what happened before, but because—" He hesitated. "Because what?" "Because I care what happens to you," he finished quietly. "Not as a case study or proof of concept, but as a person." Catherine absorbed this, her fingers tracing the progression of his research. "Did you know about my father's plans to commercialize your work?" "No," James said firmly, "but I understand why he wants to. Your father sees solutions in systems and scale. He believes helping one person is good, but helping thousands is better." "And you don't?" James considered this. "I believe in helping the person in front of me with everything I have. The rest follows naturally, if the work is sound." He met her eyes directly. "I want to continue your treatment, Catherine, not for your father's approval or my professional redemption, but because you deserve the chance to reclaim whatever parts of your life are possible to reclaim. Before Catherine could respond, Mia burst into the lab, her face lighting up at the sight of her friend. Catherine, you came back!" She rushed forward, stopping just short of the wheelchair as James had taught her. "Are you still going to teach me ballet?" The simple question broke through Catherine's remaining defenses. This child saw her not as a business opportunity or medical challenge, but as someone who had something valuable to give. "Yes, Mia, I'd like that very much." Later that afternoon, as Catherine demonstrated arm positions to an attentive Mia, William's car appeared on the gravel driveway. James stepped onto the porch, prepared for another confrontation, but what he saw surprised him. William emerged from the vehicle without his usual commanding presence. His suit was replaced by casual clothes, his manner subdued as he approached the cabin. "She's inside with Mia," James said before William could ask. "She came to me this morning." William nodded, relief evident in his face. "I'm not here to take her back. I'm here to speak with you." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This contains a legal document relinquishing any claim Wilson Pharmaceuticals might make on your research or treatment methods. I've also terminated the preliminary market analysis and patent investigations." James took the envelope cautiously. "Why the change of heart?" "Because Catherine was right," William replied simply. "I've spent her entire life trying to acquire solutions rather than being one." He gazed toward the cabin, where laughter could be heard from within. "I don't want to buy your research, Dr. Reynolds. I want to support it, as a benefactor, not an owner." "What exactly are you proposing?" "A foundation," William explained. "Independent from my company, dedicated to advancing your work on your terms. You would have complete autonomy over research directions and treatment protocols. I would provide funding, connections to regulatory bodies when you're ready, and access to manufacturing capabilities if treatments need to be produced at scale." James studied the older man skeptically. "And what would you get out of this arrangement?" William's facade cracked, revealing the vulnerable father beneath the CEO exterior. "A chance to do something meaningful with my resources, a way to help my daughter without controlling her. Perhaps," he hesitated, "an opportunity to become the kind of man who deserves her respect." Inside the cabin, unaware of the conversation taking place, Catherine guided Mia through the 5 basic ballet positions, adapting them for the child's limited flexibility. For the first time since her accident, she felt the joy of dance flowing through her, not through her legs as before, but through her teaching, through Mia's enthusiastic attempts and proud smiles when she got something right. "Catherine," Mia asked during a break, "do you still want to dance, even if your legs don't work right now?" Catherine considered the question with surprising lightness. "I'll always be a dancer, Mia. Maybe not the kind that performs at Lincoln Center, but dance is more than just movement. It's how I see the world, how I express what words can't say." "My mommy used to say that about her music," Mia replied thoughtfully. "That even when she wasn't playing piano, she was hearing songs in her head." Catherine smiled at the comparison. "Your mommy sounds very wise." "She was," Mia agreed solemnly. "Daddy says she's still teaching us things, even though she's gone." She looked up at Catherine with innocent perception. "Maybe you're still a dancer, even if other people can't see it right now." The wisdom in the child's observation struck Catherine deeply. Perhaps her identity hadn't been lost in the accident. Perhaps it had just transformed into something she hadn't recognized yet. A sensation continued to return to her lower extremities, now reaching mid-thigh on her left side, and beginning in her right foot. She found herself less fixated on whether she would walk again, and more interested in who she was becoming through this journey. When James and William entered the cabin together, both Catherine and Mia looked up in surprise. The tension Catherine expected was absent, replaced by a cautious accord between the two men. James carried the envelope William had given him, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "Dad? What's going on?" Catherine asked. William approached her wheelchair, kneeling to meet her eyes, as James had done that first night. "I'm not taking over Dr. Reynolds' research," he said quietly. "I'm supporting it, with no strings attached, no corporate involvement, and no pressure for immediate results." Catherine searched her father's face for signs of deception but found only sincerity. "Why the change?" Because I finally understood what you've been trying to tell me for years, William replied. That my love has always come with conditions and expectations. That I've been trying to fix you instead of support you. His voice roughened with emotion. I want to do better, Catherine. Not just with your recovery, but with our relationship. As Catherine processed her father's words, James unfolded the document from the envelope. Your father is proposing to establish a foundation that would fund continuing research and treatment development. I would maintain complete scientific independence, while having the resources to help more patients. He met Catherine's eyes. But I won't accept without your blessing. You're not just my patient anymore. You're part of this journey. Catherine looked between the two men who had each tried to help her in their own imperfect ways. Her father, with his resources and determination. James, with his knowledge and compassion. For the first time since her accident, she felt not like an object of their attention, but a participant in her own story. On one condition, she finally said, the foundation isn't named after either of you. It's named after Sarah Reynolds and dedicated to helping patients who can't afford cutting-edge treatments. James's eyes widened at the mention of his late wife, while William nodded immediately. Of course, whatever you think is right. Mia, who had been quietly observing the adult conversation, suddenly clapped her hands. Does this mean Catherine stays, and Ong Wilson too? The innocent question brought unexpected smiles to everyone's faces. James ruffled his daughter's hair affectionately. Yes, sweetheart, they're staying. 1 year later, the Sarah Reynolds Foundation for Neurological Recovery opened its doors in a renovated ranch house just outside the small Montana town. The facility, modest by medical standards, but state-of-the-art in its equipment, employed a staff of 6 therapists trained in James's methods, with James serving as medical director. Catherine, now able to stand and take supported steps with specialized braces, became the patient advocate, working directly with families to ensure their emotional needs were addressed alongside their physical rehabilitation. William divided his time between running his company remotely and serving on the foundation's board, using his business acumen to navigate regulatory challenges and secure additional funding sources. Though he maintained his corporate responsibilities, his priorities had shifted dramatically. The CEO, known for 60-hour work weeks and ruthless efficiency, now blocked every Thursday afternoon for ballet lessons. Sitting in the small studio attached to the foundation, where Catherine taught adaptive dance to patients and local children, including Mia, who had become her star pupil. The foundation's first anniversary celebration coincided with a milestone in Catherine's recovery. After 18 months of intensive therapy, countless setbacks, and slow but steady progress, she would demonstrate her improved mobility publicly for the first time. The community had gathered in the foundation's central therapy room, converted for the evening into a performance space with chairs arranged in a semicircle and soft lighting, creating an intimate atmosphere. William sat in the front row beside James and Mia, the unlikely friendship between the corporate titan and the reclusive doctor having deepened through their shared commitment to Catherine's recovery and the foundation's mission. As the room quieted, Catherine appeared in the doorway, supported by a sleek carbon fiber walking frame of James's design. She wore a simple ballet practice dress, her dancer's posture evident despite the adaptive equipment. The music began, Debussy's Clair de Lune, Sarah Reynolds' favorite piece. Catherine moved slowly into the center of the room, each step deliberate and hard-won. Her upper body expressed what her lower body could not yet achieve, her arms flowing through the choreography with the grace that had once defined her professional career. When she reached the center, Mia joined her, the 7-year-old mirroring Catherine's arm movements while dancing around her stationary form, the young girl becoming the physical expression of Catherine's artistic vision. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as the performance concluded, with Catherine achieving a moment no one had thought possible, releasing the walking frame to balance independently for 5 precious seconds, her arms in perfect 5th position above her head, before James stepped forward to support her. The applause was thunderous, led by William, who made no attempt to hide his tears. Later that evening, as the celebration continued with food and conversation, James found Catherine on the facility's back porch, gazing at the mountains silhouetted against the twilight sky. "You were magnificent," he said, joining her at the railing. Sarah would have loved your interpretation of her favorite piece. Catherine smiled, the expression now coming naturally where it had once been rare. I choreographed it for her in a way. For the woman whose research gave me back parts of myself I thought were lost forever. The research was mine, James corrected gently. The courage was yours. And the stubbornness was my father's, Catherine added with a laugh, nodding toward William, who was inside entertaining Mia and other children with surprisingly skillful magic tricks. Who would have thought the three of us would end up here? James followed her gaze, reflecting on the unlikely path that had brought them together. A desperate knock on his door during a rainstorm. A moment of connection when he'd knelt before her wheelchair. A simple offer. Let me help her. None of them could have imagined how that moment would transform not just Catherine's physical condition, but all their lives. Some forms of healing can't be measured in medical charts, James observed quietly. Sometimes the real miracle isn't in the physical recovery, but in what we discover about ourselves through the process. Catherine nodded, feeling the truth of his words and the newfound purpose she'd discovered as an advocate and teacher, in the reconciliation with her father, and in the unexpected family they had formed, not defined by blood but by shared experience and mutual support. Inside, Mia broke away from the group, rushing onto the porch to take Catherine's hand. Come on, Catherine. Ong Wilson is teaching everyone the magic coin trick. You have to see. As Catherine allowed herself to be led back inside, supported by James on one side and Mia's enthusiastic tugging on the other, she reflected that, while she might never dance professionally again, she had found something perhaps more valuable. A life defined not by what had been lost, but by what had been found. The paralysis that once seemed like the end of her story had become merely a chapter in a much richer narrative. In the Foundation's warmly lit common room, William performed sleight-of-hand tricks he'd learned specifically to entertain the younger patients, his corporate seriousness replaced by grandfatherly playfulness. Watching him interact with the children, Catherine barely recognized the distant, achievement-soaked father of her youth. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been plenty of missteps and old habits reasserting themselves, but his commitment to change had never wavered. For the first time in her adult life, Catherine felt she had a father, rather than a benefactor. The celebration continued well into the evening, with patients and families sharing stories of progress and hope. Some improvements were dramatic, others barely perceptible to outside observers, but monumental to those experiencing them. James moved through the room with quiet confidence, no longer the reclusive doctor hiding from his past, but a man who had found his purpose again without sacrificing his principles or his relationship with his daughter. Mia had blossomed in this expanded family, her natural empathy finding expression in her relationships with patients and their families. Though still homeschooled by James for academic subjects, she received a more comprehensive education through her involvement with the Foundation, learning compassion, resilience, and the complex reality that healing wasn't always about cure, but often about adaptation and acceptance. As the gathering drew to a close, James found himself standing between William and Catherine, the three of them watching as Mia demonstrated a simple ballet position to a young patient recently admitted to the program. The tableau captured everything the Foundation represented: the integration of medical science with human connection, the bridge between different worlds, and the profound healing that occurs when people commit to supporting each other through life's most challenging journeys. We did good, William said softly, his gaze fixed on his daughter, who now moved with a grace that transcended her physical limitations. James nodded, thinking of how far they had all come from that rainy night when desperation had brought them together. We're just getting started, he replied. Catherine smiled between them, reaching out to take each man's hand in hers. The CEO who had learned to value people over profit, and the doctor who had found the courage to help others again despite his fears. With Mia twirling before them, embodying the joy that had returned to all their lives, Catherine felt a completeness that had nothing to do with whether she would ever walk unassisted again. Some forms of healing went far deeper than the physical, restoring not just function but faith in oneself and others, and in the possibility that what seems broken beyond repair might actually be transforming into something new and equally valuable. In the soft Montana twilight, surrounded by the community they had built together, that truth had never been more evident or more beautiful.